Hi, my name's Ben, and I like plants, mushrooms, dogs, and stuff like that. Welcome to the thing that I made. The plan is to go look for some plants and mushrooms. I don't really know what's going on at this point, so I'm just going to show you a bunch of things that I find interesting. Okay? Let's go into the woods. All this wet weather has been really good for finding mushrooms. Here's a fun mushroom that's edible but also poisonous at the same time. It's the common inkcap mushroom, or Inky Cap, or my favorite, the tippler's bane. If that's not a spoopy name, I don't know what is. You can tell what these are because of the weird pale, smooth, khaki shorts colored egg-like caps, and the smooth white stems. I don't know if that's a really good explanation, but you know what I mean. In older mushrooms, the caps liquefy into a black inky substance and look pretty gross. Don't eat them when they look like this. The gills, when still in immature mushrooms like these, are a darker color and very close together. These mushrooms are pretty small, but a big clump like this would make a sizable addition to a meal, as long as that meal doesn't have any alcohol with it. That's the fun thing about Inky Caps. When consumed on their own, they're perfectly good, plain mushroom. But when consumed with alcohol, that's where the fun begins. Or, not really fun, but sensitivity to alcohol and poisoning and maybe a trip to the hospital, so not fun. Ink caps contain something called coprin, which interferes with the body's process of alcohol metabolism. So eating these within the same day of drinking alcohol can cause some serious side effects. If you just have one drink, you're probably looking at some flushing and mild discomfort. Anything more than that, and you could be vomiting and at risk of cardiac arrhythmia. So that's really fun. Good luck with that. Apparently, some mild interferences can even happen after up to 3 days of consuming these mushrooms. So if you're the type of person who forgets what they ate for lunch yesterday and enjoys a casual beer, you might want to stay clear of these. So here are two pretty banged up looking mushrooms. They may look ordinary at a glance, but when you look closer there's some interesting stuff that happens. These are called red-mouth boletes, probably because when you flip the cap upside down, all of the pore surface is a bright orangey red. First off, they're not at all edible. I'll just start off with that. The cap's color varies somewhere around peachy, while the stem is a little bit more yellowish. Looking back at the underside of the cap, you can sort of see the start of some telltale bruising on the pore surface. Many mushrooms bruise when the tissue is damaged, and this can be extremely helpful when trying to identify the mushroom. Perhaps the most distinguishing characteristic of this mushroom is that when you cut it, the flesh changes from yellow to blue almost instantly. Here, let's take a look. As soon as I cut the mushroom, it turns blue. It's one of the most insane bluing reactions I've seen. So yeah, these mushrooms are poisonous, causing extreme gastrointestinal distress when eaten. On the surface, they might seem like an ordinary bolete, but the bluing reaction makes it nearly impossible to misidentify them. These bad boys can make some interesting colored dishes, but poisonous ones. And I'm not sure about you, but I would never trust eating anything that looks this blue. So, yellow to orangey brown, peachish colored cap, yellow stem, red pores, insane bluing reaction. That's the red-mouth bolete. Do not eat. Next we have these things. So, who is this bush with the plump, juicy, succulent fruits that glisten like rubies? What do you call these berries that taste like cough-syrupy butthole and absolutely destroy your insides? Well, these are the not-so-native honeysuckle, a plant that plagues disturbed lands and open fields throughout the eastern United States. You can find them just about everywhere and anywhere except for the most pristine wilderness, and then probably even there too. The berries get eaten by animals and the seeds get dumped all over the place, so it spreads like crazy. It's a shame that these berries are no good for people to eat, since the bushes are almost always completely laden with fruit. If you can't ID them by the fruit alone, take a look at the slightly fuzzy, oppositely attached leaves. Another good ID feature is the hollow stem of the new growth that my camera refuses to focus on for some reason. So yep, that's some honeysuckle. don't eat that either. This mushroom looks like almost nothing else out there, apparently except for an old man, hence the name Old Man of the Woods. It's a name I can sort of understand. I mean, it has these woolly, scaly, dusty gray things hanging all over the place. It's kinda like an old man's scruffy beard, or disheveled hair. Flip it on over to take a look at the small, spongy, hexagonal pores. That hints that this mushroom is in the Bolete family, which contains some really good edibles, like the porcini mushroom. I accidentally banged this mushroom around a little bit, and that showed one of the other key identifying characteristics. At first, the pore surface and flesh should be grayish, but when bruised, it turns a pinkish color. So that's cool. Usually a lot of the edible mushrooms look pretty good to eat. They tend to be clean, plump, and delicious looking. So it may be a little surprising that these gross, old manish looking mushrooms are in fact edible. They may not be the best, most delicious, gourmet, scrumptiddlyumptious mushrooms, but you can eat them. And as with some other wild mushrooms, it would be best to go for the smaller, younger ones. The big maggoty ones won't be too good. The younger specimens I found nearby didn't have as much of the scaly texture as the older, more mature ones. They're a little more silvery, but still kinda rough. This one was particularly old manish, with its woolly scales billowing in the breeze. So majestic. Yeah, so these are definitely some of the dopest mushrooms I've found. This is a wild plant that you might have actually heard of if you frequently browse the herbal pharmaceuticals aisle, or if you've ever been feeling down and wanted a natural pick-me-up. This is St. Johns Wort, Hypericum perforatum. The perforatum part comes from the small, hull-like glandular dots on the leaves, making them appear perforated. If you hold the leaves up to the light just right, you can sort of see what I'm talking about. There's these black dots, but also the faint perforation-like things that let the light through. The plants can also be identified by the bright yellow flowers spotted with black dots. If you know your flower anatomy, you should take a closer look. You can see that the flowers have just a few stigmas, which are the ladybits. Those are the parts that are receptive to pollen. All around those are a ridiculous amount of anthers, which are the pollen-bearing bits. Just like honeysuckle, St. Johns Wort is yet another plant introduced to the United States from Asia. Although, unlike the useless honeysuckle fruits, this one is potentially useful. A cool tip for figuring out if a plant is useful for something is to look at the name. In this case, it's St. Johns Wort. And that ending of wort is commonly used in plant names that have had medicinal or edible uses, such as mugwort or motherwort. So, what's it good for? This plant has been used in herbal remedies as an antidepressant. Plants like St. Johns Wort that have weird biologically active compounds in them get fun when they go inside the human body. There are a bunch of potential side effects, such as numerous harmful interactions with medications, possible intestinal distress, and even photosensitivity. The last one is not fun at all. After taking a few doses of St. Johns Wort, you have the potential of becoming extremely sensitive to sunlight, and burning to a crisp. So you might feel a little bit better, but you could also not be able to go outside without getting severe sunburns, so that would really suck. If you do want to use this little yellow wort, talk to your doctor first and don't die if you can avoid it. Now on to yet another little yellow flower. This is a fun little plant that's also in the legume family, alongside things like beans, peas, and clover. It's pretty easy to identify with its bright yellow flowers, which I think kind of resemble a multi-headed Hydra banana stegosaurus thing, but other people think they're like eggs and bacon, or eggs and butter, which are also common names for the plant, but I like my thing better. The leaves on the plant have 3 little pieces each, somewhat like a clover, but the leaves are much more narrow and pointed, like a bird's foot, so that's probably where the name Birdsfoot trefoil comes from. The Birdsfoot trefoil is an invasive species in parts of North America, which is a shame since it looks pretty neat and fixes nitrogen into the soil. In my area it doesn't seem too prolific, but you do see it occasionally here and there. So, is it edible? Well, yes and no. Many grazing animals can eat it without any problems as a nice high-protein forage. but it does contain small amounts of cyanogenic glycosides, which release cyanide when consumed, so they're not that good for people to eat. Apparently the amount of cyanide is small enough not to be extremely dangerous, but you should probably stay away from eating this just to be sure. So, no banana stegosauruses for you. Or at least not inside you. Or well, just don't eat them. So, what's this thing that looks kinda like yellow poop stuck to a tree? This is a plasmodial slime mold, known as the dog vomit slime mold. What we're seeing here is the athallium, which is its spore-bearing structure that resembles a poopy sponge. The fun part is, when you scratch the surface, you reveal a crumbly brown, spore-filled interior. And you can draw with it if you want. Leave a happy little guy. Or an angry guy. I know, I should have been an artist. Alright, so that's really all of the interesting things that I found today. I'll have to go out and look for some more stuff to talk about later, unless you really feel like watching a few minutes of dragonflies' butts pulsating. Okay, well, good night. I love you.